Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Elixir Specialty Coffee. Head to elixirspecialtycoffee.com and check out the Coffee for the Frontline initiative that is being launched through Elixir Specialty Coffee. We'll be talking more about the partnership between Elixir and Coffee for the Frontline and what Coffee for the Frontline is all about. It's a program that will be rolled out as a Map It Forward initiative to the whole coffee industry. So please stay tuned and go to elixirspecialtycoffee.com to check it out. It's an initiative that will hopefully stimulate all small businesses across the world with regards to the coffee industry. Today on the Daily Coffee Pro, we are talking about the coffee price crisis in the time of COVID-19. And for those, just a very quick kind of history, short history on what I mean by the coffee price crisis. Across 2019, pretty much across the whole year, we were experiencing devastatingly low coffee prices on the C market. The C market is the futures market it's a futures exchange that coffee is traded on in futures contract. These are terms that are new to you. You can head back and look at episodes of the Map It Forward podcast with Carly Garner. She's a futures commodity trader and broker, and she breaks it down really well. Other episodes that would be interesting for you are conversations with Felipe Croce from last year and another one with Felipe and Stephen that was early in the year last year. So take a look at those. It'll give you a great history. There's also some great blog posts on our website to help with that. The futures market is not an accurate depiction of what the value of coffee is. What it basically means is this is the price that the market is willing to pay for coffee and that producers are willing to sell coffee. So it's a mechanism to exchange, buy and sell coffee into the future. The complexity comes into that when you start to understand that coffee never actually has to exchange hands. So they can keep rolling those contracts over and speculators, people who actually aren't in the coffee industry, can use the C market as a mechanism to just simply make money. So it's a very complex, very interesting part of our industry that can seriously do your mind in if you don't have the right people that are explaining this to you. It takes a long time to understand. We spent a significant amount of time on this podcast exploring what the coffee price crisis was and why it happened. Now, the coffee price crisis was indicative last year by the fact that prices were ranging as low as 87 cents per pound US dollars and up to, on the high side, about $1.13, $1.16, I believe. So that was the high price for that. But the highs for that were very rare throughout last year. Now, the first question to ask would be, is that enough to pay producers for coffee? Well, no. The second part of that question, why is the answer no? Well, the answer is no because while we don't know how much it costs producers to produce commodity coffee, which is the coffee that is traded on the C market, we definitely know that it's not that cheap. And the reason we don't know how much it costs to produce coffee is because the limitations of a lot of farmers. Most farmers don't keep detailed spreadsheets of the way that they're producing coffee and the cost that it costs to produce coffee per pound. They don't keep detailed records of the cost of doing business. They aren't able to track that over time. Now, not all producers don't have that, but a lot of the big producers do have that. But the majority of the smallholder farms don't have that information. So we can't get an accurate understanding of how much it costs to produce coffee per pound USD. But we do know that 87 cents per pound is absolutely not even close to being enough. And even $1.16 in most cases isn't in any way, shape or form going to cover the costs of producing the coffee as well as the cost of doing business. Bearing in mind that a lot of these producers, when they take out loans, those loans are between 30 and 50% in interest rates. And so when you are looking at that kind of overhead to produce a pound of coffee, even in the very rare case where it is costing you somewhere around $1 per pound to produce the coffee, the overheads are astronomical. So that's a very quick kind of understanding of what the coffee price crisis is. It's a huge dip, downward dip on the C market that happened leading into 2019, stayed all of 2019. It's one of the longest price crises that we've had, and it resulted in a lot of producers around the world, an increasing number of producers realizing that producing coffee just wasn't at all a viable option for them. So they started cutting down their trees. This, had it have continued to go on, was going to lead to an uncertain future for the coffee buying world, because as you can imagine, the less supply we have, the demand may increase or buying habits may change at the other end. But before we got deep enough to understand the long-term ramifications of the coffee price crisis of 2019, COVID-19 hit, or coronavirus, SARS-2. The virus, the coronavirus called SARS-2, that expresses the disease, COVID-19, showed up in 2020, last month, started to spread all over the world. And we started to ask questions about how is this new crisis, this pandemic, going to impact the coffee price crisis. And we've had a few wonderful guests on the podcast talk about how they are starting to experience, or what they predict they will experience, with regards to how this pandemic will affect their work for the next couple of harvests. And the short answer is we don't know how this is going to influence the coffee price crisis. The pandemic hasn't been running long enough for us to understand what the deep ramifications of this are going to be. But something that we absolutely have started to witness is that the price on the C market has started to increase. So the average price that you're seeing is in the last 30 days, is between $1.12 at the very low point and almost $1.30 at the high point over the last 30 days. So that's most of April and the tail end of March. Now, that's significantly higher than where the price was this time last year. So when you take the consideration of what was happening with the coffee price crisis, and you add to that other mitigating factors that may play into influencing the coffee price crisis and how this evolves. And they are 4 elements. We've spoken about them before, but we'll go into a bit of a deep dive with regards to what they are and how they'll clash, or how they'll influence this coffee price crisis. Those 4 elements are how this pandemic is going to influence the US dollar against other currencies. And so what you'll start to see is, as the strength of the US dollar stays where it is, you will notice the strength of other currencies starts to decline against the US dollar. This will influence the way that coffee is purchased from a quantity perspective, because the same US dollar today buys you much more coffee than it did a year ago from countries like Brazil, because their currency is 70% weaker than it was this time last year. So year on year, you're starting to see that while the price may be higher, the currency is weaker against the American dollar. And so that's going to be one element that is going to influence the strength or the way that we are going to see this price crisis continue to unfold into the pandemic. The other situation that will have or play into the coffee price crisis is the relationship between supply and demand. We don't know yet how the supply versus demand is going to pan out until we have a better understanding of how origin countries are going to be affected by the pandemic from a health perspective and from a logistical perspective. We do know that supermarkets and supermarket-led coffee sales are increasing somewhere between the range of 100 and 400%, depending on what supermarket it is. Now, this is driving it's not driving the price up, but it's definitely driving the consumer need for, at least at the moment, it's driving the consumer demand for coffee up. This is going to have other ramifications with regards to the coffee industry. It's going to change the way that we on the consumer end engage with our customers. But what you're going to find is that because the demand of certain types of coffee are going to go up, the price we expect for that will go up. And that will be driven by a number of mechanisms on the C market. One of them could be that the way that speculators respond to the news that they're hearing. Now, on the other side of the demand relationship in supply and demand, we have supply. That could be influenced by the two other factors out of the four that play into this model. If the health situation for COVID-19 starts to ravage origin countries, specific origin countries, or all of them, what you're going to find is that production is going to slow down. There may be some instances where production has to halt altogether, simply because people cannot get access to their workforce. And if COVID-19 gets into a community, makes people sick, causes mortalities, and you see that the workforce reduces, farms may have to shut down or stop operations. Now, in places like Brazil, where production is more often than not mechanized for some regions, this will be less impactful. And what you'll start to see, and it'll be really interesting to watch, you'll start to see that in different origins, because they have a higher yield thanks to mechanization, they may be the origins that get high price for their coffee, even though they have a high yield. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. People can speculate as to what's going to happen, and our guests that have come on the podcast recently have all said that right now they're just speculating. And the things I'm referring to right now is the commodity market, the way that the specialty market is going to be affected because it's not dependent on the C market integrally. It is influenced by the price on the C market, but it is not tied in a very hardwired way to the C market. But you will see flow-on effects to the specialty market because of this, for the same four reasons. Now, the fourth reason that you will experience, the fourth thing that will influence the coffee price crisis is the logistical influence of COVID-19. So if what you find is that farms can produce coffee, even if it's at a slower rate, but we cannot move the coffee around the origin country. We cannot get it to port. We cannot get it to consuming countries. Or if you find that workforces cannot migrate around origin countries because of COVID-19, closed borders, because they're not allowed to get on buses and move to different cities for the picking season. All of these things are going to influence over time the way that the coffee price crisis is experienced. So an example of that, if an origin country cannot produce coffee because of logistical reasons or for health reasons, the yield is going to go down and the coffee price crisis is going to hit farmers in an even bigger way than they have been hit before, because they simply cannot produce the yields that they need to cover the costs of running their business. These are very real, in-depth problems that we do not have answers to. The clashing of the coffee price crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, is going to be something that we have to observe over time and wait to witness and document the history of the way it ends up evolving and expressing itself. We live in a new industry. We don't even know what it's going to look like. We may be inside, not able to be in cafes for an extended period of time. When I say extended period of time, I think it's going to be more like 12 months from now, if we're lucky, before we can return to any kind of semblance of normal. Now, that normal is still going to be new. It's going to be the new normal. And that means that there will be no more dine-in cafes for the foreseeable future. They're looking at a vaccine. The quickest vaccine that has been made ever, is 4 years. And that was the smallpox vaccine. No, it wasn't the smallpox vaccine. It was the mumps vaccine, 4 years. And if we're looking at 18 months for a coronavirus vaccine, when they've never, ever been able to produce a vaccine for a coronavirus that was 100% viable, then we're in some weird territory now. So I tell you this to help you manage your expectations of what's coming and to pique your curiosity in tracking how this coffee price crisis unfolds. And the third reason I tell you this is to motivate you to find new ways for us to be able to help sell more coffee to consumers so that we can stimulate reasons for producers to want to grow as much coffee as possible and get importers to get that coffee into the country. The more we can push coffee and sell coffee, the more incentive there's going to be to make sure that we bring it into the country, particularly for specialty coffee. It looks like the coffee price crisis has the pandemic has pushed the price of commercial coffee higher than it previously was. It's still not at a fair price for farmers, but it definitely has done good things for pushing the price up. What we need to see is the demand go up so that we can use all of this coffee. Before this happened, we still had far too much coffee for the demand. The supply outstripped the demand 4 years running. This was going to be the 5th year that happened, and then the pandemic hit. So I hope that gives you a bit of a not too deep dive into my thoughts on how the coffee price crisis and the coronavirus pandemic are clashing. It's incredibly interesting to take this moment and start to get an understanding of how we could influence this if we all came together and tried to come up with a solution by helping consumers understand a new language in coffee. I hope you found this helpful. Join us for an Instagram Live at 4 p.m. every day at IMapItForward on Instagram. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.